single day in the country, there are people who are, the inequality is one that grinds millions of Americans into poverty and enriches a tiny handful of people. That goes on every day. That's gone on every day probably since the country was founded. So, but the thing is, of course, it's a non-issue in the corporate news. But then you continue onwards, and all of a sudden we have a $17 trillion national debt. And the news isn't, acting like, hey, wait, there's something very wrong here. All right, there is something very wrong. When you get a national debt like that, but also when you get trade deficits like we've got, all right, there's this entire agenda, the globalization of free trade, and it's been the subject of a lot of protests. And of course, all of those have been minimized or edited out by the mainstream media. The year 2001 included a summer that was protests, all across the country. The streets were in protest of the free trade agenda. We were getting things like the PNTR for Communist China, the WTO, and continue onwards with things like FTAA, Free Trade Area of the Americas. There's a sign at today's protests about the TPP, that's the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm sorry, am I too loud?
No, not at all.
Okay. Trans-Pacific Partnership, that's a good issue that, needs to be looked into. Right now, the mainstream media is ignoring it. Fukushima is another good issue. Then right now, the mainstream media is ignoring it. And the free trade agenda is one where, it's de-industrialized the country. It's the reason why we've lost jobs. It's the reason why the economy is down. And corporate America has no intention of reversing it. The powers that be are uninterested in the issue. And so therefore, they're not even trying to bring the economy back. All right, so major issues really ought to be covered. And why is the Hartford Courant and Fox 61, entirely one-sided about this? I might even offer a thought that I think is bipartisan. All right, on the right, I think that the conservative media in this country is not conservative enough. And on the left, I think that the liberal media in this country is not liberal enough. The simple fact is that both sides, got together on the neo agenda. It doesn't matter whether you say neoliberal or neoconservative, because they entirely agree with each other about being sold out. And that's one side, being sold out. Okay, so that's one side. What about, the 99%, basically? And that's what's unrepresented in the mainstream media today. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be speaking out against them, and thanks for taking it in.
Beautiful. Thank you.
We want truth in reporting. When do we want it?
Now!
Okay, what we have here is our friend talking about Tiananmen Square. Next year is the 25th anniversary of Tiananmen Square. They're going to be moving back in, trying to get freedom, which is what we're supposed to be about here in America. But we're wondering why the U.S. military is in an operation with the Red Communist Chinese military in Hawaii in the next week or so, supposedly on emergency preparedness. There are 500,000 persons, according to Amnesty International, being held in Chinese prisons without even charges. But we are having the Red Chinese Communist Army present in Hawaii to assist our military in emergency preparedness and humanitarian issues. We'll release those prisoners. Let Americans know that our government is cooperating with the Red Chinese Army, even as we speak in Hawaii. Wake up!
Hey, I didn't read that in the Hartford Courant. That can't be true.
Oh, it's not in the Hartford Courant that the Red Communist Chinese Army are participating right now in joint exercises with the U.S. military in Hawaii? Why is it the American public isn't informed by these atrocities? Right near Pearl Harbor, we have the Red Army from China working with the U.S. Army. You want to know why people react? You want to call us knee-jerk conservatives or knee-jerk liberals? How do you take the Red Chinese Army and put them in Hawaii this week? For crying out loud, we need the news. We need the truth.